Yesterday, we spent the whole day talking about finding deals. We did not get into the letters that are in the book yesterday, and I'm not going to get in much into them, but if you look on page 155 in your manual, you'll see a whole bunch of kick-butt letters that are in here. You guys want to use them. I will tell you, if you're going to use Kathy's system, you don't even use her letters. Don't mess with these. Her letters are tried, proven, tested, work over and over again, not only for her, but students all over the place. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel and try to take her letters out and put these letters in. Doesn't make any sense. And because you don't know for sure which one of these letters is going to work for you in here, I can tell you that Kathy's letters work because she keeps pulling them out and testing them and fixing them until they do. You've got letters in here on about anything you want to send a letter out, or any targeted prospect you want. If you look through here, you got letters on just generic houses for sale. That's first. Flip it over. You got foreclosure letters. You got a boatload of foreclosure letters in here. You got some of Ted Thomas's letters right out of his manual on foreclosures. They're pretty darn good letters if you take time to read them. If you'll notice, you got a letter 1, a letter 2, and a letter 3 in here from Ted Thomas, which is sequential mailing, which is, if I ever get time to train you really on the real art of marketing, you'll know that you don't send one letter, you send a series of letters. And if you send one letter, you'll get about 10% of the response you send through a series of letters. So there's a series of letters right there. And then if you look on page 172, you'll see a kick-butt letter I wrote. I know it's good because I wrote it. However, I've got other letters right in this book that work better than that one for some reason. Yes?
I read the foreclosure letter that you'd written. I read it last night.
This one I'm talking about?
I believe it is.
The one that says behind on payments, Jacksonville man will loan the money?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
What's your experience been in keeping them in the house versus just buying them and having them move out?
Okay, what you're concerned about is that I'm telling them that I'll make them a loan to stay in their house?
Correct.
Well, that's a good question. But believe me, I have never made anybody alone in foreclosure. That's not the purpose of the letter.
Okay.
Yeah. The purpose of the letter is to get them to call me and go under the radar. In other words, my approach is, let me loan you the money to keep your house, while everybody else is saying, let me come steal your house. Get it? Now, if somebody had enough equity in their house, I would be glad to loan them the money. I'd loan them my IRA money. You guys listen to this now. I'll just write down an example. Let's say you got a $100,000 house, and they only owe 80 on it. And they need $3,000 to bail it out of a foreclosure. Who'd make a $3,000 second mortgage on that house out of your IRA at 18% interest, 10 points? Well, absolutely. What's the worst case scenario? They default, right? Well, who's got to get notified in case of default? If you're a second mortgage holder, at least you have the rights to. What are you probably going to do in that case? You're probably just going to go get the deed from them and get them out of the house. Worst case scenario, you lose $3,000. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
That's the worst case scenario. But you add that on to 18% interest and points, whatever the law will allow you to charge, and I'd say the odds are with you. Make 10 loans, lose 3. Who cares? But you're going to wind up with a bunch of the properties back because, honestly, there's a good chance if they're in foreclosure now, they're going to be back in foreclosure someday in the very near future. There are reasons that people get into foreclosure. I've been in foreclosure, and many of you have been in foreclosure. And when you're in foreclosure, it ain't your fault. At least as while you're in foreclosure. But later on, when you look back, you come to realize it is your fault. It's all your fault. It's only your fault. Whatever you did or didn't do caused you to go into foreclosure. Now, you don't want to hear that while you're in foreclosure, of course. So don't be going to somebody's house and say, look, this is your fault you're in foreclosure. Because you will be shown the door. I can tell you that right now. But the actions we take put us into foreclosure. And I know you're going to plead the case. Yeah, but what if I get sick? Yeah. Well, why didn't you handle your finances prior to getting sick so that you could stand making a payment or two without having a check come in? It's your fault. It's that simple. Most everything that happens to us is our own fault. But I don't want to get off on that tangent. Anyway, I use this letter to try to get them to come in under the radar. And the letter works. But there are other letters that work better. I thought this letter would work a lot better than it did. It works, but I thought it would just blow the doors down with people trying to get themselves out of foreclosure. But I forgot one thing. One thing. People in foreclosure, I don't care what they tell you, for the most part, they want a quick fix. They want out, and they don't want to have to work at it, and they don't want to have to sweat over it. If I make people a loan that are in foreclosure, what do they got to do? What do they know they got to do? They got to pay it back. And when you get into human psychology and you study what the emotions that actually make people act, I think you'll come to realize that the reason this letter didn't work better than it worked is because people don't really want me to figure out a way to help them get out of foreclosure. What they want is to get out of the house so they can get their life back and free up their mind. So I should have got a lot more calls than I did on that letter. I mean, if you read that letter, you take the time when you get a chance, you read that letter. It says, I don't care what your credit looks like, I'll come in and loan you the money to get out of foreclosure and you keep your house. And all you got to do is call me and I'll tell you on the telephone whether I can help you or not. Anyway, move on. Letters to landlords, next page. Letters to out-of-towners. Now, just for the record, on page 177, when you're sending a letter to out-of-towner, you don't leave the words letters to out-of-towner at the top, do you? Okay. That's for your benefit, all right? This is not made to copy and send out in the mail. And on page 180, remember that handwritten letter I told you about? This letter gets an amazing results. It's handwritten with red ink. See where it says red ink down there? On yellow. Red ink on yellow paper. And dropped in the mail. Of course, it doesn't say this simple letter in a plain hand-addressed envelope does very well. Okay? Just a letter. It's just like the letter that John's sending out here right now. John's is even simpler. And it works. And I'm going to tell you, if you're going to send letters and you're not going to use Kathy's system, just do these handwritten stuff here. Forget about all the fancy stuff. Now, you understand that you only write this letter once. You have it copied. But I'll tell you, if you personalize it and if you put the address in there like John's doing, you're going to get a lot better results. So you can have the letter copied and then you can just handwrite the name and the address. Don't handwrite, if you're sending a letter to Dear Frank, for crying out loud, make sure that Frank and Dear look alike. So use the same kind of pen and the same kind of color. Sometimes common sense evades us and we screw up our own campaigns just because we're not looking at what we're doing. Next page, 181, the Whitlock Group. You'll probably recognize that letter come right out of my book, my Fast Cash book. And if you look at the response mechanism at the bottom, it gives the customer a chance to send those back. I'm telling you, that response mechanism works. When I was sending out these letters, I would send out 500 at a time and usually buy 2 or 3 houses from it. And since it was working so well, we quit and started doing something else. And we got very few calls. We got a lot of these things back at the bottom, especially if you put a self-addressed stamped envelope back to you in there. I wouldn't stamp it. I just put a self-addressed envelope in there in this case, because these are just vacant, ugly houses is what these are. We don't have any clue if they want to sell it or anything. Next page, the condemned house list letter. Now, and in fact, after that, you'll see Jeff Collar's letter. You're going to meet Jeff Collar tomorrow, for those of you who have it, on page 183. Now, if you'll notice on page 183, Jeff's put the address of the house there at the top in his letter. Now, that works, but let me give you a tip. Do not send somebody a letter and saying, public record says your house is condemned at 601, or so public record says your house is condemned. If you're going to do that, for crying out loud, you better put an address in it. Because if you send them a letter to where they're currently living and tell them their house is condemned, you're going to get some hate calls. How do you think we know this? How do you think we found this out? Never occurred to us that the people wouldn't understand that we're talking about the house that they're not living in that's condemned, because nobody's living in condemned houses. I mean, we got some nasty calls. What do you mean my house is condemned? I'm going to report you to the Better Business Bureau. My house is not condemned. I'm living in it. Oh, well, we didn't mean that one. We meant the other one over here. So we got to where we put the address in there. Now your house on 123 Main Street is condemned. Now they get it. Oh, yeah, we got the call all right, but I'll tell you. There's a great article in here that Richard wrote, How to Shamelessly Use Sex to Increase Your Direct Mail Response. Don't worry, ladies, it doesn't include anything illegal. And that's a very good article, actually. In his case, he was talking about a Marilyn Monroe stamp. I inserted it in there because Richard writes good stuff. Guy actually knows what he's doing. All right, with that said, let's move over to the ugly house business. But before we do that, I want to do a recap of what we did yesterday. And you guys, we only talked about 8 things yesterday. You understand that, don't you? 8 ways to find houses. How many of you attended the old 3-day guerrilla marketing boot camp I used to do? Okay. Did we have a few more than 8 ways in there? Yeah. 3 days of what we did yesterday. 3 days of going through ways to buy houses. But do you need 3 days of it? You need enough to keep more leads coming in than you can stand. You see my... Yeah. Just because you're rich don't mean you got to have couth. Let's make a list. What was first? What? Ads were first. What was second? It don't matter what order. Yellow pages. And signs. And we talked about cards. And we talked about ant farm. Then we talked about postcards. We talked about websites. And we talked about direct mail. Is that 8? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Now, I think the question is what are you guys going to use? How many are going to use ads? I hope so. Some kind of ads. Yellow pages. Okay, a few of you. You don't have to question whether I ought to leave that out if you're not going to use it. On the other hand, maybe not if you don't use it now. At least you'll know for when you're ready. Signs. Okay, y'all got to use signs. Cards. Got to have cards. Well, you don't have to. I don't have one. Ant farm. Okay, if you're using an ant farm, you're looking for junkers. Everybody understand that? That's what we're going to get into today. How many of you don't intend to do junkers in your business? You're just not going to raise your hand, are you? Okay. I know better than that, because some of you already told me you're not interested in junkers. Well, today you're going to get interested in junkers, because what you really mean is you don't want to do rehabs. And today I hope I can get you interested in rehabs, because I think you ought to be doing them both. I'm doing them both. We're doing them both. We're always doing rehabs. I mean, Robin Thompson is here, and I don't want to do all the rehabs like she does, but as you'll see, she's doing very, very well at it. And some of you very well may want to pattern yourself after what she's doing, because she systemized it so easy anybody can do it. Postcards, how many are going to do that? Good. And websites, you all better have your hand up for that one. All websites. You all have a website. Now direct mail, how many are going to do that? Okay. Now, next question is, what are the top 3? There is no top 3. Save your breath. These are the top 8. They're all top, so I don't know what are the top 3. Top 3 are the ones you pick. Your job, pick 3 you like. Pick 3. You know what I'd do? I'd pick 3 I can get done. That's the 3 I'd pick. And look at the advantages and disadvantages. For example, what's the disadvantage of ads? You got to keep running them. Okay? What's the advantage of yellow pages? You don't got to keep running it, which is why I'm using it. Once it's in, it's in. For me, it's a grief factor, because I know all this stuff works. I just don't, I got other things going on in my life. Signs, what's the disadvantage of signs? Somebody's got to put them out. By the way, should that be you? Get somebody to put out signs. And think about this. Should whoever's driving the neighborhood looking for junkers, putting out flyers on the vacant houses, also be putting out signs? You betcha. Cards. What's the disadvantage? They don't work in your wallet. You got to hand them out. Ant farm. Somebody's got to go out and bring in the leads. Postcards. That's why I brought Richard. There's no disadvantage to postcards if Richard's doing it for you. I can tell you right now, if you guys are mailing postcards, it ain't going to get done. So if you've got postcards down there and you think you're going to do all that crap, it ain't going to. Quit fooling yourself. What's going to happen is that you think you're going to do it, and you're putting it on your list to get around to, but then life happens and you keep putting it off, and no matter what you're going to use up here, what happens if this stuff doesn't get implemented? Nothing. Correct. What happens? is leads don't come in, but you have good intentions. But leads aren't coming in. And if you do anything to allow the buying machine to get shut down or slowed down, that's the same as closing up your Walmart store for a few days and taking a vacation. If you don't allow business to come in, nothing's going to happen, and it starts a domino effect right on down. And if you have a hole, some people think that the thing to do is to crank up the buying machine and then slow it down until you get a few houses sold that you have. That's a deadly mistake. If you slow down your buying machine, you're creating a hole in your pipeline. Now you got to crank your buying machine up and wait a few weeks for everything to get cranked up and get started while you're sitting around. You never, ever, ever shut down the buying machine. You can always wholesale off properties. You can always ignore decent deals waiting on the big hits. But you don't ever shut down the buying machine. Under any circumstances do you stop looking for people with houses for sale. Because the minute you shut it down that is when that deal is going to come in with $100,000 equity in it that you're going to blow because you think you're too busy trying to move them out faster than you're moving them in. I've been at this a long time, guys, and I'm going to tell you, the last thing you want to do to fix an exit problem is to kill the entrance. Does everybody understand that? Once you get the buying machine get up, you keep it up. All right, the ugly house business. Before I go on, what did I say spend on cranking up your lead machine? No more than $2,000. Try to keep it down to $1,000. Can you see how to do that on there? For instance, my Yellow Pages ad cost me $650. That gives me $350 to play with to do something. That would put out a lot of signs. And I wouldn't even come close to spending $350 on the ant farm because I couldn't handle all those leads. And don't take but a handful of those. Postcards, I could mail out. Now, I wouldn't be able to mail out a lot of postcards, but I can mail out a bunch. And of course, this thing costs $40 a month, so that's an easy one. And I can mail out quite a few letters for $350. I can run some cheap ads. So, $1,000 goes a long way. And just remember, I ran a Yellow Pages ad. It's my choice. That's $650 of my whole budget. Take that out of the loop, and you can do a lot up there for $650. Does everybody see that? So it doesn't take a lot of leads to get you guys in a position to where you got some killer deals right before you. And the things that I use up here for the most part are going to bring in leads worth pursuing, not one of these businesses where you got to get 100 leads to get one deal. After we get through today and tomorrow, you guys are going to learn pre-screening, and you'll see it doesn't take that many leads to get a deal. You heard Donna tell you yesterday, we process a handful of leads to get a deal. 4 or 5 leads gets us at least one deal. Why? Are we something special? Let's move into uglies, which we're going to start on page 203. Step 1 is to learn the basics. I got people in this room right now who really believe that they truly understand the junker business, and certainly there's people in here more advanced than others, but I've found after teaching the junker business that by the time we get through the day, I'll bet you the smartest junkie in the room here is going to pick up some things that they didn't know that make their life easier and streamline their business. There's a system to buying junkers, and the good news is that anybody can pick up this system very quickly. Honestly, to wholesale a junker, it's 6th grade stuff. It really is. It's 6th grade stuff, except for you thinker brains in the room that want to complicate it. It is not complicated. It is simple to wholesale a junker. It is simple to find them. It is simple to estimate repairs. It is simple to formulate an offer, and it is simple to sell it. And that's why a lot of people gravitate to it to generate some cash quickly. In any well-rounded business, you're going to have opportunities to sell wholesale junkers, pick up a check for a few $1,000s and be done with it. What I like about wholesaling is when it's done, it's done. There are no costly entanglements. There are no buyers to deal with afterwards. There's nobody living in the house that you know of. You don't deal with contractors. You don't deal with raising capital most of the time. When your buyers are investors for the most part, so they're not picky. They know exactly what they're getting into. You don't need to worry about all that stuff that bothers you, like lead-based paint and radon gas and asbestos and mold and all that stuff that keeps you awake at night. That in reality really doesn't make any difference either. None of that applies here because you're finding junkers and you're selling them to junker buyers, finding bargains and flipping them to the bargain hunters. In fact, it's turned into such a good business that it's all some of my students do. It's all they choose to do. I, of course, wouldn't agree with that, but hey, if you want an easy life, where you don't have to work too hard and you don't have costly entanglements, there's a case to be made for setting up a business that's nothing but junkers. There's some pretty big companies out there that don't do anything but wholesale houses. Some of them do 20 a month. When your minimal, absolute minimal net profit is $5,000, and I'll tell you, it won't be long till you'll figure out that you can raise that fast. I wouldn't consider wholesaling a house for less than $10,000. And I think you guys ought to set your same goal. It's just as easy to make the 10 as it is to make the 5. You just got to get a little bit better at buying and a little bit better at selling. That's all. Same house. If you can make $5,000 to $10,000 or more per deal, and I've got letters in my file of students who have made $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 wholesaling junkers. Not retailing them, wholesaling them. One house. Now, of course, you're going to have a difficult time making $60,000 on a $70,000 house wholesaling. So obviously the numbers have got to be larger that you're wholesaling. Wholesaling works in the larger numbers as well as the smaller numbers. It works better in the smaller numbers because it's easier to find the buyers who can raise the capital. If I live in San Francisco, it would not stop me, however, from wholesaling houses. It would not. I might change the terms just a little bit. I might make it easier to buy by doing split funding that we're going to get into here today. But I would wholesale a snot out of them. Wherever you live. In Canada, wholesaling works well up there. I got students up there wholesaling houses. In New Zealand, I doubt that even New Zealand could find something wrong with wholesaling houses. Because the truth is, it's nothing more than tying up a property and finding somebody who wants to pay more for that property. And when we get to it, you'll see there's two exits. There's two ways to handle that: simultaneous closing or an assignment of contract. You may have heard the words flipping is illegal or some nonsense like that. That's not true. There's nothing illegal about flipping. It's fraud that is illegal. Fraud takes place when you are rigging appraisals, rigging down payments, rigging financial statements for your owner-occupant buyers so you can get them financed. That's illegal. What we're doing is simply wholesaling. We find a bargain, we pass it on to a bargain hunter. If I own this piece of crap right here, this overhead, which I do, I think, and I paid $100 for it, or agreed to pay $100 for it, and somebody said, come along and says, I need that bad, I'm doing a meeting next door, I'll give you $150 for it. Do I have every right to find a buyer for this piece of equipment before I actually take delivery of it and or give my seller money for it? See, it would be unconstitutional for me to not be able to try to sell something for more than what I paid for it by simply talking to somebody else. Now, I can't deliver this piece of merchandise until I paid for it. I can't make false claims. I can't misrepresent. However, I can flap my lips till the cows come home, and nobody stop me from doing that. And incidentally, if you don't believe it, just go on eBay. What do you think eBay is? They go on another auction site, they buy crap. They put it on eBay, sell crap for more. Quite often, crap goes from buyer A to seller B and passes the middleman in the middle. In fact, most of the time, the man in the middle never even takes possession of the crap. I know, because a lot of my stuff is being sold on eBay, and I know I'm not shipping it to them, so it's coming from somewhere. By the way, there's 2,200 sites with my name on it selling stuff on eBay, and I promise you 2,100 of them is doing it illegally. And I'm coming down hard on them. In fact, did you guys notice my warning in the front of this book? Well, it's the first time I've ever had to put a warning. Let me touch on that for a second. That would be on page 6. If anybody gets the idea to go copy this stuff and sell it, you might want to think twice on that, because when I get wind at it, I'm coming. You can't copy copyrighted stuff and sell it, just for the record. It's illegal. It's federal trademark copyright laws, and I am going to enforce mine to the hilt. In fact, I've hired a national law firm to warn people and then literally sue them. I expect 25 lawsuits to be instigated within the next 30 days for copyright infringement. And on eBay, they don't even try to hide it. I can't tell you. Anytime I see my name, I assume that they're copying it and reselling it. Now, of course, you can buy something and resell what you bought, and nothing anybody can do about that. But when you start copying copyrighted materials and offering it on eBay to the public, for crying out loud, that's against the law. You can't do that. Just so you'll know. How to get on that anyway? Oh, wholesaling. Some people think that there's something wrong with it. Believe me, there is absolutely nothing illegal about wholesaling houses in any state in the union, regardless of what other people tell you. Now, there are some states where title companies have a problem doing the simultaneous closing because they want you to actually bring in the money to buy it before they'll let you sell it. That's an easy problem to overcome. We'll get to that. In fact, the easiest way to overcome it is doing an assignment of contract. An assignment of contract, which means that you're just putting it under contract and assigning your rights to the next buyer. Believe me, that's a simpleton way of doing business, and probably the easiest way. So, let's go through the system. We'll go through it step by step, and when the end of the day is here, you guys tell me what would possibly stop you from wholesaling houses. Why would you want to do it? It's called cash flow. Cash flow. If you're in here and you need a check quick, I got to tell you one of the fastest ways. There's two ways. A, find a junker, flip it. B, get a deed, lease option it. And those are the two things you folks ought to be focusing on if you need to raise money quickly. Wholesale a property, get a deed. Now, many of you in the room should start rehabbing properties right away. And I really think you should. However, if you can't get groceries on the table by next Thursday, you shouldn't get involved with a rehab right now. You should find a way to get cash flow coming in quickly. Of course, I guess I could make a case for buying a property, get a private loan on it, bringing some cash out the day I bought it, and then rehab it and get the biggest bang for the buck on it. But that comes with costly entanglements. Wholesaling does not. Some of you, though, this is a pretty astute group here. I would say probably 50% of this room have their cash flow needs taken care of already, and they don't need to raise that money real quickly or die, and groceries are taken care of regardless. And so there's a lot of different financial levels in here, and you're going to have to find your way through this business based on where you're at in life and the way you want to run it and the way it suits your needs the most. And I will tell you, though, that regardless of where you're at, I mean, look, I rarely wholesale a house. Donna and I wholesaled one here a couple months ago, though, because some guy came along and offered me so much I couldn't stand it. I had to sell it to him. I just had to. Our intentions were to retail it. We had an estimate on it and everything. Rehab it and retail it. In fact, I'm going to show you one here right now that Donna and John don't know it, but we're probably going to retail it. They just got it the other day from that letter John sent out. So somewhere along the line, wholesaling is going to fit into your business. Some of you, it may be your main business, at least for a while. Also keep in mind that you rehab and retail the same houses you wholesale. The house is the house is the house. It's ugly. The only difference is you have to decide what you're going to do with it after you get it. I will tell you this, worth making a note. If you're going to rehab and retail houses, do the ones with the biggest profit in them. Rehab the houses with the biggest profit in them. Don't rehab the houses with the smallest profit in them. It's the same amount of work, big profit, small profit. So get the big profit. So a good rule of thumb could be wholesale all the problem properties and retail all the good properties, if you have a mind to. That's basically what I do. And I like retailing properties that are in good sellable areas. If the area is marginal, I'll whack it. Get it out of here. Let some real estate investor hasn't been trained yet deal with it. I don't want to mess with it. They need an education. And it is my job to educate, right? Okay. They need that education. Let them go deal with those hard to retail areas in. If you're going to rehab and retail properties, you've got to be in areas where people who can qualify for a loan want to live. That means those areas without the bullets flying around. If they can qualify for a loan, they'll know the dangerous areas to live in, and they'll want to live in the not so dangerous areas. And by the way, the houses in the dangerous area look just like the houses in the not so dangerous. But the people who are buying know the difference. And so anytime I get anything in a war zone or that resembles a war zone mentality or in an area where I just feel is hard to sell, I wholesale it. Anytime I get it in a good, hot, easy to sell area, I consider strongly retailing it. Now, suppose I got more rehabs going than I want right now, then I may wholesale it anyway. And there's nothing easier to wholesale than a well-located junker in a good, solid area suitable for rehabbing and retailing houses. I mean, I've wholesaled hundreds and hundreds of houses, from the worst war zone properties to the nicest properties. And I didn't have trouble wholesaling any of them. In fact, the cheapest property I ever bought was $750. A bank repo. A realtor brought it to me. It was in a war zone extraordinaire. I told the realtor, I don't want it. He says, make him an offer. I said, I don't want it. He said, make him an offer. I said, okay. Tell him I'll pay him $500. He said, okay, I'll tell him. So he came back and said, nope, they wouldn't accept your offer. They got to have $750 so they can pay me. I said, okay. Tell him I'll give him $750. Put it under contract for $750 and sold it for $6,000. Never laid a hand on it. It's the cheapest property I ever did. However, that is the same property that I went up to check out because I was so proud of it. I had to see what a $750 house looked like. And the truth is, it had a brand new roof on it. And the exterior wasn't in bad shape, but the interior needed renovated. I walked in the house and there was 3 guys laying on the floor all naked. Scared the heck. I went up the steps, turned a corner, there's 3 guys laying there looking at me. Hey, they're probably all drunked up or doped up or whatever, but man, I tell you what, that was a wake-up shock. And they were ugly guys too, man. And I said, hey, what are you guys doing in this house? Like I was, in charge, I said, you guys don't belong here. I'm going to go away, and then I'm going to send the police back. You better be gone. And I was going away regardless. I never went back to that house again, ever. And I wholesaled it quickly. So, hey, when I got the check, though, there's $5,000 profit there. There wasn't nothing wrong with it. See, when you get the check, nowhere on that check does it say war zone or not war zone or really ugly or semi-ugly. It says cash me quick. So just keep in mind, when you're going to wholesale properties, you can wholesale them in the war zone areas just as well as outside the war zone, as long as you understand the war zone rules. It's just a commodity, guys. You don't have to live in it. You don't have to like it. You don't have to even if you believe nobody would ever buy it. You find a bargain and buy it cheap enough so that you can offer it to a bargain hunter cheap. You got a buyer. Especially in this heated economy with real estate investors out there buying courses off the television and wanting to get rich by next Thursday, not having a clue what they're doing. And I will tell you, wherever you live, there are investors who will pay too much for properties. We call them the greater fools. They're getting their education the hard way. That's not the way I want you to build your business. But when they come in and they just beg you to buy these properties, hey, let them have what they want. All right. War zones. Talk about war zone. What is a war zone? It's going to be difficult for some of you to spot a war zone because some of you actually don't even have war zones. For example, you folks who live in Calgary, they're in a war zone in Calgary. And there's cities in this United States, not very many, but there are some without war zones. And that's probably good. That means that you don't have the crime that some of the other cities have, because you'll find a lot of your crime is concentrated in your war zones. If you don't know where these tough areas are, all you got to do is ask around and you'll soon learn where you probably don't want to be. But I would caution you on that. I come from Jacksonville, Florida, city of about 1 million people. The north side of Jacksonville is the weakest of the 4 sides of town. It is the low-income side, parts of it, but just parts of it. I mean, I got $1 million houses in the north side of Jacksonville, but I've also got war zones up there, and it's the weakest side of town. And for the general perception for the rest of the town is the north side is where all the crime is. And there's a lot of the crime in the north side because of the pockets of war zones that are up there. And I lived up there for, 10 years. And in fact, the first 10 years in this business, that's where I lived. So, and not in the war zones, but I lived on the north side of town. Actually, 20 years. What am I talking about? I lived up there for 20 years in that area, and I cut my teeth in that area, did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of houses. During all that time, the perception never changed about the north side of Jacksonville. And it's still perceived as the weakest part of town. I made a boatload of money up there. So you got to be careful to whom you listen, because if you're talking to somebody who never goes into the north side, they will tell you that the north side is bad. But I'll tell you, be your own judge. If you go into an area and you see that the properties are well kept and the lawns are mowed and people take pride of ownership, you don't need to worry about that area. There may be some crime in there, but even if there is, that's a good sellable area. Because when properties are well kept and they take care of the property like that, Those properties are not hard to sell, even if they're on the borderline. I think you'll spot the war zones. I think you'll instantly know where you don't want to be. I think you'll see the crime element there. I think just cruising through there you'll know. But worst case, you put a property under contract and the market tells you, ain't no way I'd buy a house in there. You'll get a feeling for where you don't want to go the next time. Now, right there I lost some of you. Oh my God, that means I'll have to buy it. Then what do I do with it? Guys, if you put a property under contract, you give the seller a $10 deposit, what are your obligations? You have two choices. You can buy the property or you can lose the $10. Those are your only two options. They're your only two choices. So understand, putting a property under contract and not buying it does not make you a sinner. You will not go to hell for that. It means you lose your deposit. And that's all it means. It means you didn't know enough about that property to make an intelligent decision to begin with, and you lose your deposit, and you chalk it up to experience. It's a $10 seminar, cheap seminar. That's the only way you're going to know where the war zones are, is get out there and screw up. Or ask other people. And you'll discover quickly where you don't want to be. And you only have to learn this once. Or you might discover that there's a market in areas where you didn't think there was a market because you don't want to live there. Wholesaling properties can be done anywhere in your city. I'll tell you what, you can give me some properties in the worst war zone where you live. But if I can buy them cheap enough, I can sell them cheap enough to make them irresistible to landlords. And so there's a fortune in war zones. But that's not exactly where I'd like for you to wholesale properties. And you ladies, for crying out loud, I don't want you down in those war zone areas now, walking through those houses, looking at those houses. It's a dangerous thing for ladies to be in war zones. It's bad enough for men to be in war zones. But truth is, if you do it my way, you'll never have to get out of the car anyway. And in fact, if you do it my way, you'll never even go see the house. But you won't do it my way. Especially the men. You're going to do it your way. And in the beginning, you're going to want to see everything and lay your hands on everything and touch everything you do. Which is okay. I guess that's the way you learn. But think about it. If I got an ant farm going out there and bringing me leads, and I'm paying them like $5 like that sheet I gave you in there with the ant farm instructions, and they're bringing me photographs because that's part of the deal. They can't bring me the lead without the photographs. Can you see enough from photographs to determine whether you want to make an all-cash, low offer on a piece of property? Say yes, Ron. I don't have to go look at houses to make offers on them. Somebody does. But if I see a picture, and if I get a feel for the area, and I get an idea of what the repairs are, when we get through repairs today, you're going to quickly realize you don't need a pencil or a calculator to estimate repairs. In fact, the last thing you want to do is take a pencil or a calculator to estimate repairs. And if I ever catch anybody in here with a ruler in their pocket to estimate repairs measuring something, I'm going to smack you big time. All you thinker brains, you leave your tape measures at home. We don't need tape measures, we don't need calculators, and we don't even need a pencil by the time this day's over. All of you are going to be able to estimate repairs before you leave this building today. Any questions on war zones? Can you find them? A? Yes. What if you make a mistake? You lose your deposit. You know what you're worried about more than your deposit? Life. No. You're worried about having to call the seller and tell them you can't buy the property. You're worried about the rejection. Do you know that the fear of rejection is the number one fear above even the fear of speaking? People fear rejection more than anything else. They're afraid of what somebody else is going to say. So let me ask you this. If you put a piece of crap under contract and you find out things you didn't know, what's the big deal about calling up the seller? Listen, I had no idea that that property was in such a bad area. I just can't buy it. I'm sorry. Keep my $10 and don't spend it all in one place. Would you consider selling it cheaper? Whatever. You're out. On to the next deal. Then you quit crying over spilled milk, and you go milk another cow. Called experience. Determine the market value. The next page. You cannot make an offer on a property unless you know what it's worth first. And ladies and gentlemen, it makes no difference what kind of property that is. That applies to single family, multifamily, apartments, commercial properties, strip centers, and in fact should apply to any product of any kind you ever buy. You must know the market value in good condition of that property before you go firing offers at it. We call that the ARV, the after repaired value. The ARV is the key number you have to arrive at before you can figure out anywhere near what you should make an offer on. And I cannot tell you how many students send me stuff and expect me to help them make an offer on a property and they don't have a clue what it's worth. And you can't say, well, the value's somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000. That's not the ARV. So the very first thing you must figure out is the ARV, after repaired value. Now, what do you think after repaired value means? After repaired value. In excellent condition, guys. Hello, because you're going to lose that in the translation somewhere. I'm not interested in what the value of the property is now as is. Ever. I have no interest in ever knowing what the as-is value of any property of any kind is. That's not how I'm going to decide what to pay for it, as you'll see. I must know what the value in excellent condition is. And fortunately for you, that's the easiest one to find, because the as-is value there is no formula for, and it's all over the board, and no two appraisers will even come up with the same answer. It's a wild-ass guess. That's what an as-is value is. So, but the ARV is different. There's mechanisms to use to find the ARV, after repair value. If the property is a piece of junk about ready to fall down, all I want to know is, if I renovate it, put it in good shape, what is the ARV? Everybody clear? All right. So how are we going to find the ARV? First, we better figure out what the ARV is, or how to go about getting it. Well, if you look on page 206, there's a bunch of ways for you to get what we call, look on page 207 actually, and fill in those blanks. What does CMA stand for? It's not Country Music Association. What does CMA stand for? Comparable Market Value, commonly referred to as comps. C-O-M-P-S, comps. In the world of realtors, they call them comps. In the world of real estate investors, they're called comps. Appraisers, they're called comps. That's comparables, slang for comparable market analysis. Fill in the blanks. When a CMA is prepared on a house, only houses that are sold can be used as comps. Folks, listed properties are irrelevant. It matters not what some drugged out realtor decides they want to list the property for. It only matters what previous properties are sold for. Do not use listings for comps. Use sales for comps. Keep yourself out of a trap. There are three important ingredients to determine a comp. Number one, it's close in proximity. That means it's probably in the same subdivision. You cannot take a house on the north side of town, even if it's exactly like a house on the south side of town, and give them the same value. It has to be close in proximity, and that is up to an appraiser's discretion, but they will take the closest properties that match the other two criteria and use them for comps. Sometimes they have to go outside the area and do some adjustments. But usually, when you're talking about single-family houses like you guys are buying, especially in the lower end, you won't have any trouble finding comps near the house you're near your subject, as they call it. There is no ironclad definition for what close in proximity means, because it has to be adjusted according to the conditions at hand. Number two, recent sale. A recent sale can be as high as a year now. It used to be 6 months. It's as high as a year now. However, if an appraiser has a choice of using a sale that happened 9 months ago and one that happened last month that meet the other two criteria, which one do you think he's going to take? the most recent sales, especially in your hot markets. Some of you live in areas where you've got 10 to 20% appreciation a year. In that particular case, the recent sale is the most important criteria of the bunch. What's happened recently. So don't be going back and finding out what happened sometime last year to determine a comp for this year. It doesn't work that way. Within the last 6 months, even in the hot markets, those are generally accepted. But the appraisers can go back as far as a year, at least by FHA and Fannie Mae standards. Next, close-in square footage. That one is very, very critical. And if you look in your book, it says 20% plus or minus. That's a general rule that I made up. That's not in the appraiser's handbook. If appraiser is trying to figure out an appraisal on a 1,500 square foot house, he's going to use comps as close to the 1,500 as he can find, as close in area and as recent as sales. That's his job. However, if he can't find 3 good comps to use that are 1,500 square foot in that area that sold recently, he's going to go up or down. He's going to go up or down. He's allowed to go up or down. He will adjust it on his appraisal. He will adjust it by giving it a plus or a minus. However, when you get above or below about 20%, that becomes a non-relative comp, and they shouldn't use them. They should move outside a little bit rather than using a comp. For example, you can't use an 1,800 square foot house as a comp to appraise a 1,200 square foot house. That's too big of a gap. And please don't be under the impression, I got a house sitting here that's 1,200 square feet. It's selling for $100 a square foot. I got a house 3 doors down. It's 2,000 square feet. Therefore, it's worth 2,000 times $100 a square foot. You don't work that way. I'll get yourself in a trap. A huge house here and a smaller house here are not going to sell for the same dollars per square foot. The huge house is going to get less dollars per square foot than the smaller house. If you don't try to compare a huge house to a small house, you won't have to worry about that. Because I can assure you the appraiser will not. If there's any other choice, and there almost always is. So what are the 3 main criteria? Close in square footage, close in proximity, and a recent sale. You got it? Now, I don't need to turn you guys into appraisers today. And I don't want to turn you into appraisers today. And I don't want you to worry about all that little stuff that's on those appraisals that those appraisals have to worry about. I just need you to instantly recognize how to compare a property A to a property B. And I'm going to test you here in a minute. There's some other traps, though. You look at the bottom. I just added these traps here when I wrote this book. Make sure your comps were in good condition when they were sold, or they're not good comps. If I got $150,000 house that I'm looking at, and it's an excellent, and I'm comparing it as if it's in excellent shape. You can just take that back and it's in excellent shape. And then I see a comp that's the same square footage, but it's sold for $120,000. What should that instantly tell you? That it probably was not in good shape when it sold. So if you're trying to get the ARV, and you're comparing it to a property that's sold under distressed circumstances, you're using a bogus comp. You eliminate that comp. If your census and all your research tells you that this is a $150,000 area, $150,000 house, you don't use a $120,000 comp no matter what the problem was. It's out of line. You can't use that. You got to eliminate it and look for ones that sold closer to the 150. Does everybody understand that? That is a huge mistake in the marketplace. Because realtors want to use an average. Don't ever use an average sale as your comp. Let me say that again. Don't ever use an average sale as your comp. If you use an average sale, you're using bogus information supplied on properties that sold for less than they should have sold for because the seller sold them under duress or the property was in poor condition. And if you use the 120 and the 150, what does that do to an average? It drives it down and it gives you a bogus ARV. Forget averages. I can't imagine why realtors use an average. I don't get it. Well, I do get it because it's the lazy, easy way to do things. Truthfully, if I were a seller and they arrived at my market value by using average comps, and I later found out they should have sold it for $30,000 more, as far as I'm concerned, it's grounds for a lawsuit. They're representing me, the seller, and they're using wrong information, and they just beat me out at $30,000. That's how important it is. You guys do not use an average. And I'm telling you, the realtors, if you get a realtor printout out of the MLS, you'll have an average value in the neighborhood right there. And over time, they have just gravitated to that average so they don't have to do any work. Just take the average, and that's where you determine the market value. That's not the way you do it, guys. You're going to get yourself... You know what's going to happen if you use an average? You'll start with a low ARV, which will create a low offer and just totally kill your deal. In other words, you're making your offer on erroneous information. It's like looking at the Enron financial statement. You can't use comps that are sold with owner financing. They're looking for what's called arm's length transactions. Any good appraisal, when doing an appraisal, if they suspect that there was any owner financing involved in it, they won't use it for a comp. I can't tell you how many times appraisers have called me asking me if it was an arm's length sale. And I say yes. Because you see, I create comps where I live. I single-handedly drive up the market value where I live. I set the market value. I'm not a slave to the market value. When I go into a neighborhood, I never sell a house for what it's worth. I always sell it for what it's about to be worth. And what it's about to be worth is what I say it's worth. And if I can get the market to agree with that, then all of a sudden, the bank calls the appraiser, and if the appraiser sees a contract that says it's worth, but he's got a sale for more, the appraiser appraises it for more. And lo and behold, it closes, and now all of a sudden, it's worth more. I always sell them for more. And the only way I can do that is to understand what the real comps are so that I can then artificially inseminate my price. And real comps are not determined on owner financing. In fact, I got a call on my voicemail yesterday. An appraiser's calling me, and I'm left a message, and I know what he wants. He wants to find out if some sale that I've made in that area was an arm's length sale, so that he can finish his appraisal. All right, we never use an average. We went over that. Now, before I give you a test, look back on page 206 and look at all the ways that you can go about finding the ARV. Obviously, if you can tap into the MLS system, you know a realtor or you are a realtor, or you can make friends with a realtor, or you can pay a realtor, you can get comps at will anytime you want them, because that's what it's all. They're all there. They're right there. They're easy to tap into. And in fact, when you go back home, check to see if you can be an associate realtor. Call a board of realtors and see if you can be an associate realtor. In other words, can you get the MLS system? Some of you live in cities where you can tap into the MLS system without a license. You can also go to realtor.com. And there's limited comps on there, but there's some on there. There's a whole list of websites that you can get comps on. I don't trust any of them. I don't like any of them. But one of them is comps.com. Gosh, I should have put them in. There's a whole list of them because I know you guys want those website addresses so you can suck up your time and browse the internet, right? I would prefer some of the other methods in here that you use first. Now, many of you if you live in a major city, you have got some kind of a database provider there that you should subscribe to. If you know, you don't need it if you get in the MLS. But we use WinData, is the name of the company. WinDat, what is it, Donna? Huh? WinDat 2? Here's how it is, guys. Go home, find some investors. Ask them, what kind of database service do you subscribe to get comps? Just do that. Make note. Go home, ask investor where to get comps. If you live in a major city, they'll tell you, because none of them provide the whole country, and they're all area conducive. Gosh, even your credit services have these now. We get a disc. What do we get it every month, Donna? Donna? Every month? When do we get that disc? Monthly. Heck, most of them are online. We get a disc. And you'll have one disc per county, or one service per county. And there's all kinds of good information on there, and comps is what you're after. You can just pull them up anytime you want, and they'll also take you to tax rolls. Now, most all of you can get into your tax rolls without any of this. Just go to your county.org and pull up your tax rolls. But you won't find comps on your tax roll, guys. Tax rolls don't give you the information you need for comps, because it don't have sales. If it does, they're way behind. You can't trust them. So if you can subscribe to a service like that where you live, you should. Ours costs $71 a month to get this thing delivered to us with all the recent information on it. And you can pull it up, and right there you can spit out a list of comps, which is what I'm going to give you a test on here in a minute. Even if you can spit out a list of comps, you got to know how to read them. You can look for similar houses. This is what you ought to do anyway. You have a subject. You've got a house you want to buy. While you're out there getting the deed, or you're out there making an offer all cash, drive around the neighborhood and see what else is for sale with realtors. Now, I see a sign on a property that looks very much like mine. I pick up my cell phone, I call a realtor, and I ask them what they're asking. Now, is that a good idea of the market value in that neighborhood? Now, can I use that for a comp? I just said you couldn't, didn't I? Why? Because it's not sold yet. But can I assume that that realtor has done enough homework to know what that property sitting there in good condition should sell for? No. Well, yes, I can. I can assume it. You know what assume means? Make an ass out of you and me? No. But I can assume it, and I'm going to assume it until I get any evidence to tell me different. Now, what if I go, and there's another one down the street also, very similar to mine, and they're very close in asking price. If I've done all of the market research I need to do to go make an offer on that property, if I don't have any other way to get comps? Yes? Yes. Yes, I have, guys. That's all I need to do, because any offer that I make is going to be an offer without risk anyway. And that's something that I have a hard time transcribing into you guys. Even if I make a decision based on assumptions and I'm wrong, it doesn't matter. If I make an offer on a property to buy it all cash, am I going to verify its value before I close? Say yes, Ron. Yes. One of two ways. If I intend to rehab it, I'm going to get it appraised before I close on it in its after repaired condition. If I intend to wholesale it, I'm going to use comps, and I'm going to let the market come in and buy it, and I don't need to get it appraised. Either way, I win. Worst case, I find out that it's not worth anywhere near what I thought, and I forfeit my deposit. The whole $10. Now let's suppose I go in and I'm getting a deed on a house. If I get a deed on a house, am I going to be writing them a check while I'm there? No is the answer. So if I got the deed and I haven't written a check, what's the worst can happen to me? Yeah, you do this now. If I put myself in any risk, if I haven't put myself at any risk, then do I need to worry about all these little thinker brain details that keep me awake at night? I don't know. I haven't told you what a thinker brain is yet, have I? There's three types of personalities, and the first is a thinker brain. And actually, the thinker brain makes up about 10% of the population, they say. I think there's a lot more of them out there than that. A thinker brain is an analytical personality. They're accountants, they're engineers, and they have to have all the answers to make a decision. They have to have an analysis, and then they need somebody to analyze the analysis. Thinker brains move very slowly. They think slowly and they act slowly, and they cannot move without all the facts. And it's good, however, that these are the kind of brains that are handling our money as accountants and engineers and the like, because if I were going to build a building, I think I'd want it thought through very carefully, wouldn't you? Yes. So thinker brains are good. Second kind of personality are the mammal brains. Mammal brains make up 76% of the population. Mammal brains are the follow the herd mentality. The last thing in the world they want is to stand out. You'd never catch a mammal brain on a stage delivering a speech, most likely, unless they are drugged out or something. Mammal brains are impulse buyers. They're impulse shoppers. My wife is a mammal brain extraordinaire. She has a black belt in shopping, and yeah, all kinds of shopping. In fact, as I speak, she's on her way to Reno right now. I'm not going to pick on her. She's not here to defend herself. But mammal brains could fluctuate either way. They could fluctuate toward thinkers, they could fluctuate toward reptiles, but the truth is most of the populations are mammal brains. And in fact, if mammal brains didn't exist, neither could Walmart. That's a fact. And then, of course, there are reptile brains. Reptile brains make up the rest of the population, which is about 14%. Reptile brains are opposite of thinker brains. The last thing a reptile brain wants is a long, drawn-out explanation of anything. They just want the basic facts. Reptile brains have a very short attention span, and they're not going to have the patience to do the types of analysis that thinker brains do. Now, you men in the room that are thinker brains, you will read the instructions. You wouldn't do it without reading the instructions. Reptile brains, no instructions. Forget the instruction manual. Be like that hot tub I got that I paid $6,000 for with a big instruction manual. Not me. Put water in it, turn it on, get in, get butt hot, get out. What else do I need to know? Never reading that instruction manual. I mean, I got 6 of them things with my Mercedes. I ain't reading them. I'm punching the buttons till it works. If it don't work, I'll punch the one on the ceiling and ask the guy who comes on how it works. Until I'm self-taught. Pretty soon I know that Mercedes pretty darn good. But if I had to read those instruction manuals, I'd go buy a Toyota or something. I ain't reading them. I got an instruction manual for this cell phone up here. Someday, maybe, probably not. I punch buttons because it's a new cell phone. I'm able to make calls and receive calls. I really don't know what else I need to know anyway. I certainly don't need to know how to play those games on there. So anyway, of those 3, which do you think I am? Need a minute? Now, of course I'm a reptile brain. Here's a sad truth, though, for you thinker brains. 85% of the money in this country is owned by reptile brains. That's a fact. And I guess it's because reptile brains can make decisions and they make them quickly. Even though they know they're not all right, they know that the wrong ones are outweighed by the right ones. And here's something really ugly for you if you're a thinker brain, and that is that all CEOs of the top 20 corporations in this country are run by reptile brains. Because obviously, I don't see how, I just couldn't imagine a CEO run by a thinker brain getting things done fast enough to be in the top 20. Now, there's nothing wrong with a thinker brain, don't get me wrong. Thinker brain is a think and grow rich slowly mentality, and a reptile brain is I want my money now mentality. And 2 opposite personalities. The reason I'm telling you guys all this is because if you are a reptile brain and you're trying to work with a thinker brain, you've got to recognize the fact that everybody isn't like you. And you got to slow down. And you got to give more facts. And you got to let the thinker brain make the decision based on facts. And you got to make them make the decision so they feel like it's their decision, not you're running it down their throat. Opposite, if you're a thinker brain and you're trying to communicate or sell something to a reptile brain, you better speed it up. You better move along because you will lose their attention very, very quickly. The facts, and be done with it. In fact, I had an alarm guy try to sell me an alarm. Actually, he didn't try to sell me an alarm. I called the alarm company. He said, come put an alarm in my house. Come tell me what it's going to cost. I called him. The alarm was sold. All he had to do was come out and tell me what I needed to know. He brings this big old book, puts it on the coffee table. I said, what's that? He says, well, I got to go through this book. I said, no, you don't. In fact, if you open that book, get out of my house. I need to know 2 things. What do I need and what it's going to cost? That's all I want to know. I don't care about any of the rest. I called you because you guys have been around. I saved the book. And he says, whoa, man, this is going to be easy. I said, that depends on your answers. No way, I don't want the book. Throw the book away. The CEOs that make decisions, they just took a poll, the top 10 corporations, the CEOs say they make a decision with approximately 30% of the facts present. That's all it takes for a reptile brain to proceed. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of those three personalities. And I will tell you this, if the money was all removed from the reptile brain section and distributed equally among the mammal and the thinker brain, how long do you think it would be before the reptile brains would have it back? Shortly. Why? Why do you think? Correct. They have the ability to make decisions and take action and not worry about consequences. It's not going to take their life. Your reptile brains have the ability to move knowing that all the stuff we worry about is worthless, needless, mindless crap anyway, and it doesn't make any difference regardless, even if it goes wrong, which it almost never does. And I'll tell you, I've trained a lot of surgeons. Might be some surgeons in this room. And after quizzing them, I can see why. Man, this is the last thing I'd want to be as a surgeon. Because you see, a surgeon is one of those rare breeds that literally holds life in their hands all day. Man, what a burden that would be on a human being. Hey, and then with all the insurance crap going on out there and taking away half the money they make and all the liability and all the junk they have to go through, I can understand why being a surgeon is not a profession of choice anymore. And trained surgeon, I asked him, I said, why are you here? Because, man, I want to make money without having all of that responsibility. Hey, I get it. I get it. But anyway, if you are trying to buy a house from a thinker brain and you're a reptile brain, what do you got to do? Slow down. You got to talk slow. Because if you're a fast talker and you're trying to communicate with a thinker brain, you lose them. I've always been a reptile brain. But I didn't know the difference back when I started. I go into people's houses and I try to give them a seminar. They don't want a seminar. They want you to buy their house. They don't care how. They don't care what. Just buy my house. Get out of my house. That's all they want. You keep that in mind. Because the biggest mistake real estate investors make is flapping their lips way too much. Get in there, state the facts, get the deed, shut up, get out. That's going to be hard if you're a reptile brain. Now, if you're a thinker brain, you're going to want to go in there and give them everything you think they want to know, do a seminar, probably bring one of these big books in there and go through the whole book and be there 2 hours. They don't want you there 2 hours. Reptile, thinker, or mammal, they don't want you there 2 hours. In fact, they want you out of their house as fast as they can get you out of it. You keep that in mind when you get into somebody's house. You are an intrusion into their life. Get in, get the deed, or get the contract, and get out quickly. Now, what brought all that up, I have no clue, but it needed to get done. Now, back to the ARV. Ride around, look for some deals that look like yours, and you can pretty much determine the market value of your property. Now, here's one that you may not believe till you get out there in the marketplace. If you're buying junkers, by and large, your sellers don't really know what they're worth in excellent condition. But if you're buying pretty houses, you should always ask the following question. If I had your house appraised, what do you think it would appraise for?